In May 2015, after months of research and planning, Benny and David set off to Poland with the goal of identifying and following the route that Benny's father, David's grandfather, Philip Warshawsky, was forced to take during his death march from Auschwitz in January 1945. This would turn out to be a remarkable journey, taking them from Philip's hometown through ghettos to Auschwitz-Birkenau, Jaworzno, and finally into a forest in search of an all but forgotten death camp, Blechhammer, from which he escaped. Benny flew from Los Angeles to New York, where he met up with David. They flew together to Warsaw, Poland. After arriving in Warsaw, they rented a car and made the hour-and-a-half drive to the city of Lodz, where they had arranged to stay in a Jewish guest house, Linat Orchim, run by a rabbi. After getting settled, they walked down a main shopping street that had statues of famous people from the city of Lodz. Interestingly, for a city that hasn't had many Jews living in it for the last 70 years, it seemed like more than half of their famous people are Jewish. Artur Rubinstein, a famous pianist, Julian Tuvim, a famous poet. The noses of the statues are shiny because the children of the town rub the noses of the Jewish statues for good luck. The next day began with a breakfast of bread and herring, followed by an hour-long drive to the town of Zdunska Wola. Once, the town of Zdunska Wola was home to 10,000 Jews. Generations of the Warshawsky family lived and worked as tailors. At the start of the German occupation, they were forced from their homes and into a makeshift ghetto. The amazing historian Dr. Kamila Klausinska has made the preservation of the Jewish cemetery and history of Zdunska Wola her area of expertise. She sifted through town records and pulled out all the Warshawsky family records she could find.
You know that Warshawsky is a very popular surname, so there were probably a few branches.
Benny knew that his father had been married before the war and had at least one son, but he knew nothing more. The identity cards revealed that the name of his brother was Hirsch Leib. They went with Camila on a walking tour of the town, observing some of the buildings that may have been home to relatives. An uncle whose family owned one of the buildings has said that his parents buried family treasure in the courtyard. It may be there still. Most importantly was a visit to the cemetery. Benny's grandparents passed away before the war and were buried there. In recent years, their matsevas, their tombstones, have been located. David had a chance to visit the grave of the great-grandfather he was named for, David Alter Warshawsky. After the German invasion and occupation, a ghetto was formed. One day, the Jews of Zdunskovola were forced from their homes and into the Jewish cemetery. Over 200 were killed that day. 1,000 able-bodied men, including Philip Warshawsky, were selected for work in the Lodz ghetto. The rest, including 9-year-old Hirsch Leib Warshawsky and his mother, were sent to Chelmno, where they were murdered. Benny and David made the 1-hour drive to Chelmno. This was a very sad visit. So tragic to think that 350,000 Jews were murdered here, including almost all of the Warshawsky family who had lived in Zdunskovola. They were forced into sealed trucks which were filled with carbon monoxide. Their bodies were dumped into a nearby field and burned. Day 3 began with a breakfast of herring, pickles, and bread. David noted that even though it was the second day his father sat down to this same meal, he did so with a huge smile as if it was his dream breakfast. The mission for the day: find the 2 addresses in the Lodz ghetto where Philip Warshawsky stayed after being sent there. The addresses were found on the Yad Vashem database, but the problem was the Germans had changed the names of the streets when they ran the city, so another database was used to help determine the current Polish names of those streets. They were able to locate Marynarska Street, but not the correct house number. At the second address on Linoskiego Street, they found the exact building, and while looking around, a very nice resident approached them and began a conversation.
Yeah, okay, we're standing at 38 Leminskiego Street in Stary Belute, Old Belute, the site of the Lodz ghetto, Linzmannstadt ghetto. This is where my father lived, the second residence in the Lodz ghetto. The place, even though it's painted on the outside, which you can't see now, is pretty much as it was on the outside, as it was during the time of the ghetto. We just spoke to a man, a Polish man who lives here. He says that this is very, in many ways, a difficult place to live, in that he feels that there's a lot of ghosts here and spirits of people. He says he's heard sounds at night. His wife's heard sounds at night, seen visuals. They've seen sights of children walking down this alleyway, things coming out of windows. He was talking to me. I didn't understand everything, but it gave me tremendous goosebumps. I feel the goosebumps right now. It's just to think about all the different terrible things that happened in this very place.
Then another resident saw them talking to the gentleman and called them over because she also wanted to talk to them. She kindly invited them into her apartment and showed them around. They felt very fortunate for these encounters. They left the area and headed for the Radagast train station, where Philip Warshawsky was put in a train car with 80 others and sent off to Auschwitz. This was when the Russian army was approaching and the Germans wanted to get rid of all the Jews who were still alive in the ghetto. At the train station, there is a memorial to the Jews who were sent from this station to be murdered. It says, Lo tirtzach, thou shalt not kill. A simple and powerful message, and a commandment violated by the Germans. David said that he had to take a few minutes to sit and think about the hundreds of thousands of people who had been taken through the station. Next stop, the Lodz Jewish Cemetery, which is the largest in Europe. They found it to be a macabre place overrun with wildlife. It looked and sounded like a jungle. In the city of Lodz, there are actual palaces where some of the wealthiest Jews used to live. It was amazing to see how important the Jews were before the Holocaust, and now they're all gone. At the end of this day, they returned to the guest house to prepare for Shabbos. On day 5, they packed up and, after breakfast, yes, you guessed it, bread, herring, and pickles, they hit the road for Krakow, taking the scenic route. They came upon the town of Olstein and hiked up to a castle built over 600 years ago. A bit later, as they were passing through the town of Lelov, they began speaking about the Lelova Rebbe, and just then David noticed a sign in Polish, which they followed, and ended up at the kever, burial place, of the Lelova Rebbe. They stopped and recited Tehillim there. After finally arriving in Krakow, they settled into their apartment and set out to explore the old city of Krakow and the castle where for 500 years the Polish kings lived. Finally, they went to the Jewish section of the city and visited the shul of the Ramu, one of the great Acharonim. They prepared themselves for an emotional trip to Auschwitz-Birkenau, the next step in following Fivish's journey. This was the other end of the line from Lodz train station. By car today, it takes only 3.5 hours to drive this route. It took several days to get there by train. And Fivish told Benny that the train ride was one of the most awful experiences he ever had. Fivish finally reached Auschwitz-Birkenau. He had to line up for the selection between the healthy people that the Nazis wanted to use as slave laborers and the ones they would immediately kill. Fivish was 38 years old at that time, which was much older than most of the people selected to work. Knowing that he might not be considered for work, when he came in front of Dr. Mengele, who was doing the selection, he said in German, "I want to work," and so he was selected to live and to work. He was sent to what they called the Gypsy Camp, which is the part of the camp that had previously held the Romani families. Conditions there were very bad. They received beatings, almost no food, and what little Fivish got he would conserve by sleeping with it so no one would steal it. This day's mission was to find the labor camp in Jaworzno and then from there follow Fivish's path on the death march. It was a long and tiring day filled with twists and turns, but ultimately successful. Fivish was sent to Jaworzno in August of 1944 and worked in the coal mines there until January 17, 1945. The Russians were closing in on the camp, and the Germans decided to march all of the Jews back towards Germany. This was in the dead of winter and was called the Death March because they had flimsy shoes and little more than their pajama uniforms to wear. They marched for days and days with little sleep and food. Whoever stumbled and fell would never get up again. If someone lagged behind or got out of line or even bent down to eat some snow, they would be immediately shot. Fivish's plan to stay alive was to stay as close to the middle of the pack as possible and away from the edges where he might get shot. But with fatigue and lack of food, he was becoming weak and fading and feeling like he could no longer go on. At that point, a fellow prisoner, a French Jewish soldier named Max Moyes, actually shared a piece of bread with him. This was an unbelievable act of kindness since it might have cost Max his own life. All Warshawsky offspring owe their lives to this amazing man. Despite all the research that Benny did before the trip, it was turning out to be very hard to locate the labor camp. So they began at the Museum of the City of Jaworzno, where the museum director gave them a book about the camp and pointed out the general direction. He also told them that the camp had been destroyed and replaced by apartment buildings, but that there was a monument there, so they hiked through the woods in order to find it. It turned out that the monument commemorated a different use of the camp during the communist era, but nothing about the Jews. Luckily, some nice older women there, who couldn't believe that Benny and David had come all the way from America, pointed them toward the Jewish monument they were seeking. They found this separate monument, which simply said, "Victims of Nazism, 1939 to 1945," but it was nevertheless meaningful to find the place that Fivish had worked and the beginning of his journey to eventual freedom. There, they found roads that were as close as possible to the Death March route. They reached the train station where the Nazis had intended to ship the Jews to Germany. However, when the Jews got there, they were told no trains would be coming, so they had to keep on marching. The ultimate step in this quest was to find Blechhammer, the labor camp where Fivish ended his journey. This proved to be more than difficult, as it wasn't where Google Maps had indicated. They stopped many people along the road to ask for directions, but to no avail. Finally, David was able to pull up some GPS location coordinates on his phone. Using those coordinates, they ended up walking deep into a forest and down a long tree-lined fire road.
So we're in the woods. In
This could have been a place where there was a camp, considering that it's a field.
yeah.
We've been looking around. It's hard to find.
We have
We have the coordinates, but we don't know exactly.
so the GPS says that we're very, very close.
We haven't.
It looks like it's out here somewhere. We're way out in the middle of nowhere looking for the Blechhammer, the remnants of the Blechhammer labor camp. These are definitely the woods that Grandpa Fivish escaped to.
And it's definitely woods. I actually saw a deer running away from the woods.
But we're having trouble finding the exact location. It's possible we made a wrong turn somewhere, but the GPS doesn't lie, and it says we're close but no cigar. And then on the map, what is that? Oh, deer! Amazing. That thing's fast.
I didn't see this one.
It's fast. And then, and if you look at the map, in Polish it says that there's a concentration camp right here.
Były obóz koncentracji. Koncentracji.
Yeah. Over there. So,
Well, let's head back to the
our other
car.
choices, yeah, we can go back to the main road and see if there's something or a marker a little bit further down.
Soon they would make an amazing discovery, but first one needs to know another piece of the story. Back in January 1945, as the Russians were closing in on the camp, the Germans began taking groups of prisoners out into the forest and shooting them. One brave person escaped and ran back to the camp, warning the prisoners about what was happening. Figuring they had nothing to lose, Fivish, Max, and some others got a steel beam and smashed down the barrack wall and made it through the barbed wire fence separating the camp from the forest. They made a run for the forest, and sadly, most were shot and killed. But Fivish and Max were able to run until they came upon a nearby bunker in a clearing. It had some potatoes in it. They hid in that bunker for a couple of days until the Germans retreated and Russian troops arrived,
It's definitely
at which point
right nearby.
they were liberated.
Definitely
Yeah.
something was here.
Look, you can see it was a forest, but you have the remnants of installations. Here's some concrete structure. Looks like some
There's a
sort of bunker.
That's where my father hid in a bunker.
This could have, oh my god, this is a
could
bunker
be
in the forest.
bunker. This could be the bunker.
This is a bunker out in the forest. This could be the actual one. It's amazing.
That would be incredible if this were the bunker. This is where he hid for 3 days and 3 nights in the middle of the winter with his buddy Max Moise, the French soldier who saved his life by giving him food.
It's unbelievable. Check this thing out. Looks like people have been here a little bit more recently than that.
But this could be it.
People hanging out in here. Wow. That's unbelievable. Alright, well, let's head back to the car and try this from a different angle. Have it going.
I don't know if that was the bunker, but it had to be something like that. Because it is in the forest. This is a clearing in the forest. There might have been other things in the forest other than that particular gate what we're looking for. Because the gate is only the gate to the camp. It's not. Camps were much larger than just the gate. But it would be nice to see the gate as well. But definitely we are in those woods where the Russian army came and liberated my father and his friend.
They figured they were lucky to have found the forest and the bunker, but they really wished they could find the Blechhammer camp itself. They decided to give it one more shot, and they followed the forest road down another 100 meters, made a left turn, and bam, right in front of them was the gate and the tower guarding the entrance to the camp.
Zadie is climbing up. He's climbing up to the guard tower. This is the guard tower of Blechhammer labor camp, where Grandpa Fivish ended up. Look at that. Look at that. You're back. You made it. You made it. You made it.
We're here and they're gone.
That's right. Made it. Awesome. Awesome.
After climbing down from the tower, 2 local men came by and spoke with them. They were very familiar with the ruins of this camp and showed them around.
I got a recording now, so just
Yeah, what I wanted to say was that, you know, everyone knows, or at least in the family, that my father escaped from this place. Because why did he escape? Why did he take the chance of escaping in this place? The reason was that the number of prisoners were marched out into these woods and were shot. My understanding is that one of them survived or managed to sneak away from the group that was being shot heard that they were shot, knew they were killed, snuck back into the camp and told everyone else what's happening. When they heard that this was going on, that they were going to be shot, and there was all kinds of bombarding that was the Russians were bombarding this camp. So they took the opportunity in the tumult to get a hold of an iron rod, and they were able to break through the wall and run into these woods here. And as they were running, I understand, was that the Germans who were there on guard started shooting them. And as they ran into the forest, most of them were shot except for my father and this other man who had given him food in the past, Max Moyes. And they found that bunker, maybe that bunker that we were looking at, and hid there for about 3 days till the Russian army came.
So we were talking about
the actual date of liberation and
right.
the liberation itself. What was that moment like? They had come out of the bunker, and as they came out, a German soldier walked by. They saw them. They both said Shema Yisrael. They figured this is it. The German soldier said Guten Tag, good day. And they said, Guten Tag, and he walked on. He just moved along fast. A few minutes later, the Russians came, and they knew they were liberated. Then they managed to get some clothing. My father needed shoes. His feet were badly frozen. He was able to get some shoes, and then the Frenchman, Max, asked him to come with him back to France. And my father said no. He said he wants to go home to see who's left in his family. And then they kissed. That was it.
And then how did he get from here? What did he do? Did he hop a ride with the Russians? How did he get back home?
I believe he walked most of the way. That's all I know.
It's quite a walk.
Fifish eventually made his way back to his home, hoping to be reunited with his family. But no one was left. Somehow, he found the strength to begin again. After the intensity of their search, day 8 in Poland was a day to unwind and decompress. They drove up to the Tatra Mountains to Zakopane, near the Czech border. The view from the top of the mountain, the cattle, the storks' nests, were testaments to the nostalgia that many survivors had about their homeland, separate from the persecution. Day 9 was their last day in Poland, and they were in the beautiful city of Krakow. They stopped off for coffee at the Klezmerhuis in the Kazimierz district, where the Jews used to live. They recited Tehillim at the kever of the Ramah and saw his shul under repair. They viewed the Museum of Modern Art, where they saw an exhibit dealing with how, nowadays, the Holocaust is viewed, including how Auschwitz is becoming like a theme park. Driving back to Warsaw, they made one last stop in Kielce, where an event took place after the war that would change the lives of the Warshawskys and of tens of thousands of other Polish Jews. On July 4th, 1946, there was a pogrom in which 42 Jews were killed by local Polish citizens after a Jew was falsely accused of kidnapping a Christian child. Understanding that persecution, conspiracy theories, and blood libels had never disappeared, Fivish, his new wife Leah, who was pregnant with Benny, along with scores of others who had tried to return to their homes after the war, realized they needed to leave Poland. And that's how this branch of the Warshawsky family ended up in New York. Before flying home, Benny and David ended their trip in a Warsaw cafe, taking a moment to reflect on this once-in-a-lifetime father and son experience.